Hey everyone, Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey. And today is a special day for those of you who watch regularly. Guess what it is? It's party time. We're going to be celebrating the upcoming launch of our first title for 2026. And it's very exciting. We don't need to wear that because it makes my head hot. But this title that's coming out on January 25th, 2026 is a memoir plus called Inside Indonesia's Big Bang, a Canadian policymaker's firsthand look at government reform and international collaboration by Dr. Mark Gilbert. Look at that beautiful book. We're so excited. Our editor on this project was John Tatry. Those of you who know John will appreciate that there's a lot that has gone into this, and Mark has created this amazing look back at a 20-year project that he worked on in collaboration with Indonesia. I'll let him tell you more about it, but in the meantime, let me give you just a little bit of insight into today's guest. Mark Gilbert's career as a local government specialist included work as a practitioner, an international consultant, and an academic. Highlights included 12 years as CEO of a provincial crown corporation, 2 years as a financial advisor on a post-apartheid local government capacity building project in South Africa, a 20-year involvement in public sector reform in Indonesia, and a professorship at Dalhousie University. He served as a national director of the Institute of Public Administration of Canada, IPAC, for 6 years, and a board member of the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada for 3 years. He served as co-chair and later academic advisor to the GFOA Committee on Canadian Issues. Dr. Mark Gilbert holds an MBA and a PhD and has published articles in academic journals and professional association publications. He has also contributed to projects in Eastern Europe, the Baltic States, West Africa, Oceania, and South Asia through short-term assignments. He has traveled extensively throughout the Indonesian archipelago and feels at home there, but he lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is where I met him at a yoga class. So it was a while back, and we did a full loop, and we're back, and I'm going to bring Mark to join me, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that fascinating career. Hi, Mark. That's real. Every time I read that, I'm like, wow, that's so impressive. That's Mark from yoga. So welcome to the author journey. We're very excited to have you, and so thrilled that we have come to this point. Like, this has been a long journey, not only in the making of the book, like 20 years, but since we first discussed working together to bring this amazing book to life. Like, how does it feel? Does it feel real yet?
It does feel real. It felt real when the first hard copy arrived at my door. It's wonderful to see the finished product.
Isn't it amazing? It doesn't matter how many times I do this. I just want to hug the book when it first comes. And it's got such a beautiful look and feel. We're very fortunate. Our designer, David Edelstein, created this beautiful book. And I think, design is so important. And I think in this case, Mark, what do you think? Can we judge a book by its cover?
I think we probably can in this case because it's such a lovely cover. The thing that is interesting about the cover design project is that David gave us some options and different ways of looking at it and thinking about it. But the general consensus was that this was the one.
Yes, the other options were okay, but I think that this one was definitely the gold, right? And the colors pop, it draws you in, right? So
it really does.
You would be the best judge for whether or not somebody who looks at it would get a sense of what Indonesia is all about, because you have really absorbed that culture. So when you started looking back at your 20-year career, like, what are the first things that come to your mind?
It's interesting that a lot of them are on the cover that David has put together for us for the book, because the first hotel that we stayed at on our first mission was across the street from this huge monument, the Freedom Monument. And in the background, you'll see that there's a mosque off to the left, and that is the Iskatal Mosque, which is the largest mosque in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And because Indonesia is a tolerant country and has 5 official religions, you see to the right of the statue those church spires. So
how beautiful.
Yeah, there's just a lot right in the cover itself.
Yeah. And so like when we read some of the excerpts and read the back and so on, it talks about sort of the introduction to the culture. And you just mentioned like 5 different religions. There's probably dozens of languages. How did that feel like on that first trip there?
It really felt like I was in a foreign land and a place that wasn't close to anywhere I'd ever been before, other than to see it. One thing that really made a difference on that first trip is that one of the people in our group, Sue McClellan, she had done her doctoral studies in Southeast Asia, and she spoke the language and was familiar with the culture. So that really helped in terms of easing the transition and making it more interesting too.
That's incredible. And I think, in the times that we're living in now, we'll avoid any political discussion, but I love that this book is coming out now, that it demonstrates just how well, like a collaborative initiative in a difficult times and with such diverse perspectives on how things run. So take us back like that 20 or 30 years ago, because you've been retired for a while now, but retired from that, but you've been teaching at Dalhousie. Take us back to when this project first, the kernels of this project first started popping.
It was a project that IPAC, the Institute of Public Administration of Canada, came at a time when they wanted more international involvement. They wanted to share Canadian expertise with the world and also just broaden their own activity base. And the Federation of Canadian Municipalities had been working with local governments in different countries over the years, and funded by the Canadian government through CETA. So IPAC thought, they had something to offer too, and a bit more broader, because FCM was only local government, where IPAC was all levels of government and academia. So they approached the Canadian government and asked if they would provide some funds for some exploratory missions to Southeast Asia and a few other places as well. And this basically is how it all came about. So we had some assistance from the Canadian Embassy in Jakarta in terms of setting up a few meetings, but the rest of it, we were just on our own. And going to these meetings and having to work for the most part through translators. Sue was ours, the Ministry of Home Affairs provided another. And, just trying to find things to talk about and areas where we could potentially work together. Go ahead.
This has been like a lot of the narrative hones in on the peer-to-peer nature of this particular project, which, when you hear from other policy folks, they say it was unique in sort of the world of government international collaboration. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yes, and that was very much a key ingredient. It was Canadian public servants working with public servants in other countries, in this case in Indonesia, where the typical process for consultants to be involved is to basically go and work on a specific project, under the supervision of either a government or a country ministry or something like that. But in our case, it was just, talking with people and finding out what the areas of common interest were and where we could work together. And we were very flexible on our end, because we wanted to find projects that would be relevant to our Indonesian counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, we used to bring them to Canada on a regular basis as well, so they could see some of the things that were going on here. And that's how we ended up with our first project. And it was kind of interesting because both Louis Dussault and I, who were members of the original 4-person team, we'd been very busy with amalgamations in our province, municipal amalgamations, and we're very current on that. So we thought that's something that we could share. But the Indonesians weren't interested in that. They were interested in other things. And the first time we went to a conference, an IPAC conference, and invited them in Montreal, and they saw how the one-stop shops worked, then all of a sudden that's something they zeroed in on. So we picked up on it, and it became our first area of cooperation. And it was really rewarding to see it grow over time.
I have had a specific interest when you first came to me with this, with this idea for the book. And because I've been to Indonesia several times, so I was re-immersed in it. And I love Southeast Asia. I love the people, the culture. And of course, every country in Southeast Asia is very, very different. But I had been specifically to Indonesia and really enjoyed it. So I found it absolutely fascinating. And having done some, government communications work in my past. So we had a lot of this in common. I think there were so many unique qualities of this program. And, can you tell me, is it personalities that can make or break a program? And how did some of those contacts, because you had like consistent people that you worked with on both sides for the 20 years, which I think is incredible.
We did. We had a lot of consistency, and then we had a lot of inconsistency on the other hand as well. But there were 3 of us from the beginning. In addition to myself, there was the program officer at the Canadian Embassy, Jeffrey Ong, who was Indonesian. He was there for the whole time and very involved in what was going on, and always gave us wonderful updates and insights, and facilitated things that needed to be done from the Canadian side over there. And then Agung Mulyana, who was our first interpreter and participant on the at-home affairs, who spoke English and took an interest in our work. And I'm not saying the other people that we met with at the first meeting weren't interested, but I don't think we really grabbed their attention that much, because they had a lot of priorities. They were willing to listen to us and, perhaps, explore a few things, but it was Agung who had the energy to make it happen.
And you still maintain a friendship with him.
And then over time we maintained that friendship. And his wife used to accompany him too on some of the early missions, which again really helped to cement the relationship.
But it wasn't all like bubbles and roses and rainbows, right? Like there was a lot that happened throughout that 20 years.
There was. At first, we had some difficulty with a lot of turnover in the people that we were dealing with over there, which Agung really helped in terms of providing some consistency. And the other was, yes, there were just so many political changes that took place in Indonesia during that time. Because 4 years in, all of a sudden, the government wasn't the same anymore, and the priorities weren't the same, and they were going through this major restructuring, which again, this is where we get the title for the book, The Big Game. So much was happening. Because when we first went there, things were very politically sensitive, and we had to be very careful not to do anything that had a political focus or orientation, or speak out on any of those matters. And that's why everything we did to make improvements or changes always had to relate to administration, not to politics. And then when things changed, all of a sudden we went from helping improve management of water utilities, which was very administrative in focus, to training counselors and talking with them about clean government and roles and responsibilities and things like that, which is very much in the political realm. And of course, at that time, a lot of our political people in Nova Scotia, like John Savage and Stuart McGuinness, were very helpful in terms of helping with that education and transition.
That's incredible. And you talk about, and not only presidential changes, and protests, but Mother Nature didn't help out much either. So the year of the tsunami was like right in the middle of what
Yes, it
you were.
was.
Mhm.
Yeah, 2004. And of
Mhm.
course, Indonesia just sits on that ring of fire as well. So in addition to the tsunami, which was the biggest
Oof.
disaster during the period we were together, there were a lot of
Mhm.
earthquakes and volcanoes and mudslides and a lot of these other things to contend with too. Yeah.
Wow. So when you sat down, so you retired, you're thinking, looking back at this amazing career and the accomplishments that you had made, what was the deciding point for you to write it all down?
Well, the thing with the Indonesia project that was so different from anything else I'd ever been involved with internationally was that it covered a 20-year period.
Mhm.
So there was just so much reflection you could undertake in terms of all these changes that had happened over these 20 years, not only on the governance side, but also professional development, personal situations, things like that.
Mhm.
And it just seemed to be a story that should be told. And I had the time because COVID had hit. So I thought, well, I'll document it, I'll put it all together.
Yeah.
But I wasn't thinking a lot at that time of putting it into a book. But
Mhm.
all of a sudden, once I started going through each of these missions to Indonesia, the missions to Canada, I started to relive it. And then all
Mhm.
of a sudden it became real again. And I
Mhm.
thought, it definitely, there's more here than just a chronology of events. There are several stories that are intertwined with it as well. And that's
Absolutely.
when the decision was made to try to go that step further.
I think it's amazing, and I'm so happy that you did, and that you trusted me to work on it with you. And I love one of the early readers who has a blurb on the back of the book talks about those things. Like it's not just it is a sort of a chronicling of the project, and there's lots of great information at the back. And people have said, this really should be, a textbook in government policy courses and things of that nature. So if you're listening, universities. But Tim Babcock, he said this book is a rare example of writing on international development assistance programs in which the technical story is skillfully interwoven with the parallel story of the author's personal encounter with a very different culture, history, and system of governance. So you just said that you felt like you were reliving it. And so that must have been really cool to go through that process.
It really was, yes. And I'm very, very grateful to Tim for the way he was able to phrase
Yes.
that blurb that he provided for us. Yeah.
I love that. And so what was like when you first sent the manuscript out to get some feedback and ask people if they would do a blurb for the book, like, was it a scary moment, or were you like, oh, here it is, like I'm so excited, or a little bit of both?
Probably a little bit of both. But what I realized very early on, and I had asked a colleague of mine, actually someone I had met before, the late Burroughs Devaney, who had written two similar books, if he would have a look at it, because I had read
Yes.
his books and was very impressed with them and enjoyed them a lot.
Mhm.
And the first thing he came back with was, you've got some good information there, but the way it's written, it's written like a bureaucrat would write something or an academic would write something. You have to make it more interesting. And
Bless Mr. Devaney. He was a teacher at my high school.
all right.
I think so, years ago.
And that was probably my biggest challenge, was learning to write in a different way. Even though I
Mhm.
read a lot of nonfiction and fiction, I mean, to sit down and actually write it yourself, it's
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
And that was the point at which you came back to me, and
Yes,
you
it
you had
was.
been talking to one of our fellow yogis who said, Anne's a publisher, so I want to thank, I think it was Bob who re
Yes. Yeah.
influenced us, which is really cool. So I think this is probably a good point for you to do, like read a little bit from the book to sort
All
of
right.
illustrate that very point.
Okay. The excerpt from the book and the way I structured the book, and when writing it, of course, I looked at what I liked about other nonfiction, and incorporated some of the things in it. And one of those things I liked was quotes, but another was just a little bit of a few paragraphs outside the line of the story itself at the beginning of each section that gives the reader something to think about and provide some context as well. So here goes. This is called, it's the beginning of part 2, Winds of Change. And it's called Jakarta Taxi Ride. And this takes place in 1998, just as we're about to start a new phase of our mission. The exploratory phase is over. Everyone seems happy with the way things are going. And SEED has decided that they would provide us with some funding for the next 3 years, along with contributions by the Canadian government. So in Jakarta Taxi Ride, Agung and I are in the back seat of a Bluebird taxi, driving north on a crowded Jakarta side street. It's February 22nd, 1998, and the late afternoon traffic is heavy. The driver is taking a shortcut through a narrow street that could pass for a lane. Parked cars, oncoming traffic, orange, three-wheeled smoke-belching taxis called Bahas, and pedestrians compete for the limited space. The scent of Kratek cigarettes and damp earth permeate the air in 28 Celsius temperatures. The rain has stopped, but large puddles encroach on the sides and middle of the street. Our driver is patient, and eventually we're back on the main road. Our return trip from meeting with the director of the Institute of Government Studies in South Jakarta is nearly over. We're not far from the National Monument, the landmark called Monas, near the Home Affairs headquarters. Louis and Lise left in another taxi at the same time. Agung is quieter than usual and alert to our surroundings. He tells me, "This is not a good time for the IPAC team to be in Indonesia." I ask why, and he replies, "The Asian financial crisis has caused a major devaluation of the rupiah. There's public unrest and a lot of uncertainty as to where this will lead. It's already having a major impact on affordability, and people are worried. We've just begun the next phase of our cooperation, and although I don't know it yet, it's going to change in unexpected ways."
Ooh. So you allude to the unrest, the drop in the value of the rupiah.
Yeah, rupiah, yeah.
And you had also there was a moment in time. It was a period of time where there were some protests. Did you ever fear for your safety, or like how did you manage things of that nature?
We were certainly aware of the protests, but they always seemed to happen when we weren't there.
Okay.
So when we would go back, they'd be in the rebuilding phase. And we were just so focused on the project, which itself was so intense, that there just wasn't really a lot of time to be worried about safety. And one thing I found too, that one of the differences between being a tourist and being someone who's working on an international project is on the international project, there are always people there that are looking out for you, that are making sure that you're in good hands. And that made a big difference.
Right. And what was the biggest, did you have, I mean, you probably had many aha moments, but from the cultural aspect of things, and Mark, the Canadian who had never been to Indonesia, versus like Mark, who has traveled all over the world and spent 20 years going back and forth to Indonesia. What's the biggest difference for you?
The climate, of course, is probably number one. It's just always so warm there. And, as a result, people don't go out for walks the way that we do here. They may go from place to place on foot, but it's not the same culture that way.
Yeah.
But the other thing I think is the Indonesian people. They're one of the first things that people comment on when they go there. They're just so gentle and so pleasant and so friendly and so helpful. Right away you feel at ease, you feel at home. Yeah.
So it was immediate. Like you didn't say, "Oh, they can't possibly be that nice." And the pace at which they operate is probably a little bit slower than
yes, it is.
you were used to.
and part of that too probably is the climate as well, because you often,
Yeah.
excuse me, find that in hotter climates.
Yes. Oh, yes. I've lived in hotter climates, so I can certainly attest to that. So,
Yes.
do you have another short excerpt
Yeah,
that you'd
this
like to
one
share
is,
with us before we run
yeah,
out of time?
sure. This one's a bit lighter.
Okay.
One of the opportunities we had when we were getting towards the later phases of the project, and I had moved up to Dalhousie at this time, and IPAC suggested that we add an academic component as well, rather than just the practitioner one. So when I mentioned that to Agung, he said, oh, well, we should go down and see the rector of one of our universities. And she's a woman that I had met before because she was in another position when she came to Canada a decade earlier. And she was here when we had done a number of things. And one of them was to go over to Prince Edward Island and have a look at the Confederation Bridge, which had recently been built and opened. And in Indonesia, they were looking at doing something similar there between their two major islands, Sumatra and Java. So anyway, that's the context for this. So I've met this woman 10 years ago. We're now on our way to see her in Bandung, which is about a 3-hour drive at the IP.
I've been there.
Oh, right.
Yes.
That's the main campus. So here we go.
All right.
Agung and I are sitting in the back seat of a borrowed luxury car with the driver heading east. We're on our way to the IPDN campus in Jatinangor. Our good governance program will be ending soon, and we not only want to extend it, we want to expand it. Agung has arranged a meeting with the rector of IPDN to discuss adding an academic component to our next program. My thoughts turn to coffee, which has linked our countries and played in our cooperation. Indonesia accounts for 6% of the world's coffee production, and although no coffee is grown in Canada, Canadians are the third biggest consumers. When it comes to coffee, Indonesia is the provider and Canada is the beneficiary. My first office coffee in Indonesia was at our initial meeting at Home Affairs in 1994. It was served with 2 spoonfuls of sugar. During the early years, I brought home bags of Tanah Toraja coffee grown in the highlands of South Sulawesi. Before proceeding to our one-stop shop in Kentville, Nova Scotia, during the 1996 mission, I took the Indonesians to the local Tim Hortons for a sit-down cup of coffee. It was a sunny autumn day, and the experience was so relaxing, we would have liked to have stayed longer. My coffee reminiscences move on to a less present memory. I shared earlier, this is in the book, that happened during the 1999 mission to Canada, when Ibu Nagadisa, now the rector at IPDN, had reprimanded me for the way I handled a coffee stop on a rainy, windy drive back from an arranged tour of the Confederation Bridge. Even though that was 10 years prior, I'm a bit apprehensive about meeting her again. I hope she won't think me too uncouth or unmannerly for an academic partner and jeopardize our plans for future cooperation.
So what was the incident? You got off the bridge.
We were driving back to Halifax, and it was windy and rainy, and we thought we should probably stop and take a break. So when we got to Stewiacke, that point halfway between the equator and the North Pole, there's a nice Tim Hortons there at Mastodon Ridge. So we stopped there, and there were 3 van loads of people. So there'd be, roughly 18 Indonesians, I think, and 3 drivers and accompanimists. And when we went in, we just went in Tim style, and everybody got in line and ordered their coffee and paid for it, and off we went. But Ibu Nadisa was very upset with me because she said that that's not the proper way to do it at all, that one person should be responsible, take all the orders, pay the money, and then distribute the drinks. So at the time, we just agreed to disagree because everything was already in process.
And it's funny because it's those little nuances that can sometimes cause a hiccup. But apparently, moving forward, she was able to put it in the past.
She was, yes. She
Uh,
was
well,
she was very
and
gracious when we met at on campus.
yeah, and there's a lot of discussion about rice, and it's not just rice, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's with every meal, and it has to be done a certain way, but they're too polite to say it. So there's a lot of that sort of woven into the book. So I think it's brilliant. I congratulate you. We're so excited. This is our first title launching in 2026. And so it's absolutely my pleasure to celebrate this with you, Mark. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Anne. And if I could just mention a couple of more things. One of
Yes.
the things that was so rewarding about writing this book was the collaborative nature of it, because there were so many people who were involved in this story because it covers such a long period of time, both here and in Indonesia. So I contacted a lot of people for additional information, for photos, for reminiscences, things like that. And it was just a good chance to bring the whole thing together and alive again.
Oh, I
And
love it.
and I really appreciate the work that you and John and David have done as well. And again, it just makes you get the final product is so much better when you enjoy doing it.
Oh, isn't that the truth? And it
Yeah.
is all about the team. And thank you for recognizing our team members. And it's a little family, And I don't remember who coined this phrase, but really teamwork does make the dream work.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure and ongoing, because we will launch January 25th, and then the continuing begins. And I'm going to share. This is your page on the OC Publishing website, so ocpublishing.ca. And if people are interested in pre-ordering a copy, pre-launch copy, at the bottom of the description of the book here are all of the links to the online retail sites where you can pre-order a copy of Inside Indonesia's Big Bang. And that's about the time we have for today, Mark. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us. It's a good one, and I can't wait till we release it out into the world.
Thanks, Anne. It's been a pleasure working with you on this.
Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
And we'll see you all next time on The Author Journey. I'm Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing, and today we were celebrating the looming pending launch of Inside Indonesia's Big Bang that will be releasing on January 25th, 2026. So for now, I'll say goodbye and have a great day.